spilling.
Save that for a year from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Ruin
Now
my
we're
career
live.
when he's Stroud.
All right, I'm gonna just so I don't have to cut it later. I'm gonna stop and then start again. Um, and then Andrew, you can take us away. You know
Okay.
what we're trying to accomplish, right? You got the
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
I,
live.
I,
roadmap.
We're live.
yeah. Well, yeah. I'm live. I hope I don't fumble the intro as I normally do, but I'll do my best. So, welcome everybody to this special edition of the Bet the Close podcast alongside FF Metrics. I'm your host, AndrewDFS, joined alongside me my co-host Chris Bilello, the owner of Bet the Close, and RC Fischer, the owner of FF Metrics. Today we're going to be diving into the conference championship round. But before we do so and break down those insane matchups, let's talk a little bit about what happened last week and recap how we did with our betting, DFS ventures, or prop betting just in general. So, Chris, why don't you let the audience know how you did last week?
Well, as far as the picks that we all put our heads together, we were unanimous on San Francisco minus 9.5. So I think as we were
I don't
talking
even
about
remember
those,
that.
I remember Andrew jinxing us. Everything was going to be fine until he said that we were guaranteed to win that one. Well, I kind of felt like we were getting one of the two favorites. I guess I should say at least one of the two favorites of those, 9.5, what turned out to be. And Andrew, here's the place that you nailed it. I think we both were looking at the 9.5 did become 10.5.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying it's going to 10. You said 10.5, and sure enough, it ended there. So we were early to get some line value, but obviously, that didn't work out for us, and we lost that one by a mile. So the Rashad White situation was all over the place. So the yardage for the playoffs that I was talking about, that went under, that hit. I bet that one pretty good, so I was happy about the yardage for the playoffs. The yardage for the game was a loss because at the time we recorded it was 53.5, and I definitely bet that. I bet MGM was 54.5. But as I sent a note to you guys on the day of the games, FanDuel and offshore, Rashad White went to 51.5. And at Caesars and MGM, he went to 55.5. So I bet that. And the way it went down in the game, which was frustrating because he was barely touching the ball, but he was getting 9 or 10 yards every carry. He actually had 59 yards. And what turned out to be his last carry was for -4 yards. So I can't really complain because he was at 59, which had made all of the bets a loser, and he got knocked back to 55, and then a whole quarter happened, and he never touched the ball again from a rushing standpoint. He did have that receiving touchdown, so that was good. The Diggs, we talked about Diggs under, and I didn't bet that, but he went way under. Remember we were talking about different ways to get at it, but not going right at Diggs. RC's call on Trey Palmer over 17.5. That was one of those ones where RC says you're going to have it in your back pocket in the first quarter, and we did. He had 2 for 34-ish pretty early on.
Yep.
And I don't. The last one was Kincaid receptions, and he had 2 receptions on the first drive. Didn't touch the ball again until not even a target until the last drive, where he had 3 receptions, and he only had 5 targets in the game. I actually think the Buffalo's defense is the reason they lost, but Kincaid 5 targets is that was a game plan that's not what I would have done with the game plan if I were calling it for the Bills. I thought he was open, looked good, and he got 5 targets. He was 5 catches for 5 targets. So we got the over 4.5 receptions for Kincaid. That was a win. And as I was sharing with you guys earlier, I did do the alternate receptions for him. So for me, I washed out my win with a bunch of losses on the alt, trying to hit, on a 8 reception game, having a big score. So that was pretty much my weekend. So ready to move on and attack the conference championships here.
RC.
I'm just going to add that our Tampa Bay props on the passing game against the Lions, which I'm sure, talking about very soon. All the Baker props paid off the regular passing yards, over. I played the basic, but then I also played the 275 and over, the 300 over. Got that. Cade Otton went with it. Trey Palmer went with it. Got a split on Justice Hill. I thought I was going to get a double on Justice Hill. He killed the rushing yards, but I thought the receiving yards were even more of a lock, and he missed it by a yard or two. I played a late Isaiah Likely and missed that by a yard or two, but everything else, with the exception of Jordan Love going way under his passing yards, Kincaid, Otton, Mayfield, all of that, it was a good week. Picking the games against the spread just for picks, I don't know that I even picked one right, but I didn't really bet any of them seriously either, except for I tried to do the San Francisco game for fun and got my hands smacked on that. But prop wise, it's 2 for 2 weeks of killing it around the board for all of us, I believe. So I'm ready to get back at it for this week.
I think we cleaned up nicely with the prop betting, and just DFS wise for myself, I did pretty well in a large pool, but Kincaid ultimately was the reason why I couldn't win closer to like $40,000-$50,000 and had to settle for a pretty low consolation prize. It was still good to have a lineup in it and live towards the end of the game, but Kincaid really let me down in one of my DFS pools. And just picking against the spread, I got 3 of the 4 right, but the one that I got wrong is the one that stung the most because that was the best bet. That was what we were all on together, and that was San Francisco. So those hurt more when you really feel confident about a line and just doesn't hit. And yeah, I mean, we're on the wrong side of that, and we went through an injury too. Deebo Samuel exited the game early, and that kind of threw Brock Purdy off, but I still have that same strong sentiment about the Niners. I do think they're going to be the team to beat.
Well, I think that, and I had this thought, and then I heard it mentioned on a podcast earlier today. And if we see the scenario happen again, where you have a team that locks up the 1 seed and they rest their guys the last week of the season, and so they have the starters, many starters that haven't played 2 games, I think the way to attack that is the first half of the divisional round game, because you would have got both of those bets.
Yeah.
We were talking about a lot of people like Baltimore in the first half. Well, the issue there is they weren't on the field week 18, and then they had the bye week. So, obviously they can cover, but it was a punt return too that cost them covering. So, but I do think it's a good place to look. So there you had a first half team the Ravens have been dominant in the first half. More so, I think the play would have been San Francisco, or I guess it would be Green Bay in the first half. Yeah. Because just those teams that, even if they're going to come back and win the game and even cover the game, I think it's a good play to fade a team that hasn't been on the field early in the game.
Yeah, agreed. Well, before we dive in to the conference championship round, just wanted to remind the audience, please subscribe to Chris's Bet the Close podcast on Spotify. Go check out RC's site, ffmetrics.com, for the best stats in the game, projections, handicapping advice, scouting reports for all the college football prospects. Check that out. And also for even more football-related content, check out my YouTube handle at AndrewDFS. We really appreciate all your guys' support, feedback, and whatnot is very valued. So let's go ahead, RC.
Speaking of scouting reports, just teasing, there's some nuclear bombs about to drop on fantasy football metrics for the 2024 NFL draft, and I'll leave it at that. I've already dropped one. Some more are getting ready to hit.
Yeah, we got a little preview of that, and we were chatting about that for about 15-20 minutes, so you guys don't want to miss out on that. But let's focus on the games at hand, gentlemen. 3 games left on the season, getting 2 of them on Sunday. First one will be Kansas City going into Baltimore. Baltimore is a 3.5-point home favorite. Over under is 44.5. And just a fun stat, there have been only 2 quarterbacks to defeat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. That is Joe Burrow and Tom Brady. Chris, is Patrick Mahomes going home?
Well, my challenge with the Ravens last week was that there was a lot of people who were claiming that all of the questions on the Ravens were answered because they beat up on Houston. And it's easy to dismiss. It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback and say, well, Houston was a team that reached their threshold. But remember exactly what we talked about last week. If Houston was going to win, it was going to be Stroud standing on his head. Like, we acknowledged that this wasn't a great defense. So I think good for the Ravens for winning, but the questions on Lamar Jackson in the playoffs have not been answered because they beat Houston. Now, this week, I heard a lot of stats about great stats for Mahomes as an underdog, bad stats for Lamar Jackson. But I think the question is, do you call Lamar Jackson what he's always been, or do you acknowledge that maybe this new version of Lamar Jackson, who's got more experience and has, Monken offense where he's throwing the ball more and has gotten better and better as the season's going on. I started to get the feeling this week that the Ravens are maybe like the Joe Burrow LSU team that I just never bought into. I never saw what they were. I missed it the whole time. And, you don't know it's Jamar Chase and what is it? Thaddeus Moss was superstar on that
CH
team.
was on that team too.
Yeah, Jefferson. And so, I just thought LSU, I just missed them, and they were awesome. And maybe the Ravens have been the great team in front of our face the entire time. But my instinct is that, and you flip into the KC side, the questions aren't answered for them either, because the issue is their offense. And both Miami and Buffalo had tons of injuries on their defenses. So picking the game, I could not pick the Ravens laying 4 points with the question marks. If I have question marks, legitimate question marks on both sides, I'm taking the points, because the Ravens can go to the Super Bowl and, with a field goal win, and I win my bet on Kansas City, obviously. But the line is moving up. You said 3.5, but I see more 4s than 3.5s. So money is coming midweek on the Ravens. So my instinct is take the points with the Chiefs. But my question that I'll throw, because I know you're obviously going to RC next, is as I knew that Willie Gay was injured, and that's a big deal for defending Lamar Jackson, but I didn't know that Pacheco was hurt. I heard someone mention that, and that's just something I missed. And so I'd like to know more details about that. But my lean in this one would be taking the points.
And for listeners out there, Isaiah Pacheco has not practiced on Wednesday, and he did not practice today either. So that's 2 DNPs.
So I'm assuming at this stage that they're just taking it easy with Pacheco to make sure that he's ready. He wouldn't even really need to practice with the team if it came down to it. But it's something to watch. But at this stage, I'm thinking that's something we'll see him practice in full by the time game time comes around, that there won't be any limitations.
What's his issue?
If there is, it's toe
and ankle. Toe. Something like that. But he did go out on a limb to say he's definitely playing in the game. So I think RC may be onto something with him, just maybe getting rest.
Yeah, this has been somewhat of a pattern during the season. So he had the shoulder issues, and the way he runs, he has obviously taken on a lot of hits, and he's getting a lot more carries lately. So I think they're just making sure he's a full go, because for me, this game comes down to, you tell me how many carries Isaiah Pacheco had and how many rushing yards, and I'll tell you whether Kansas City won the game or not. The path to beating the Ravens is on the ground, they're starting to give up a pretty righteous amount of yards on the ground. I think of the top 5 most rushing yards they've given up to opposing teams this year, they're 2 and 3 in those games. 130 or more rushing yards. They're 2 and 3. 3 of their 4 losses this season have come in those types of games. I am thinking Kansas City has got to see that, and Kansas City has been very weak in the passing game for Kansas City's normal mode the last couple years. We've all seen the Chiefs kind of fade in the passing game in the second half because of the wide receivers. But of late, it's been the rise of Isaiah Pacheco actually getting like workhorse type carries, 18 carries, 20 plus carries in a game, and kind of leading the offense. So if Pacheco ends up being out, I am taking Baltimore and then some. But if assuming that Pacheco is fine, I'm going to take Kansas City because I think Baltimore is a legit team. I don't know that they're going to collapse, but the path to teams beating Baltimore has been to run, and take them out of sync or whatever, and you can beat them. And I don't think they're like unbeatable, wholly destined to go to the Super Bowl. They're a good team. So are the Chiefs. Chiefs are starting to hit a stride, but this is going to be on Pacheco. If Pacheco's healthy and makes it through this game healthy, I think Kansas City's going to find a way to win it.
What was concerning for me yesterday, Trey Smith didn't practice, and also Joe Thuney didn't practice. Today, Trey Smith came back, but Thuney still didn't return to practice. Those are both Kansas City's guards. Now, it looks like Smith is going to be fine, but Thuney's the all-pro guy.
I don't think Thuney will play. Yeah, I don't think Thuney's going to play.
Yeah, I thought he was out. Well, I guess we're waiting to see an official word, but I heard this week that he's all pro, but PFF, the number one graded offensive lineman this year was Thuney, and he's going to be missing from the middle of that line. I'd love to know if you guys know about the depth of their line. Who are they plugging in? Because as we've seen, a pretty decimated offensive line cost them a chance to compete with Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. And we talked about it last week, how the Ravens, they've been pretty outspoken about the fact that they are proud to be a very physical team. And so that doesn't seem like, the type of group that, these injuries are bad timing for Kansas City, and it's a bad opponent to have big injuries, a team that's going to beat you up.
Absolutely. RC, do you know the Thuney's backup and whether we're getting a situation like we had in the Super Bowl that Chris mentioned where Tampa's D-line just got after KC? Because I think they shored up the O-line after that, but I don't know if one person could really cause that big of a difference.
The guy that they went to when Thuney went out in the Buffalo game was Nick Allegretti, a 7th rounder that I don't have any real feel for one way or the other. I'm going to look up something on him real quick to see what I have on him in scouting.
Yeah, but while RC
He's no
looks
Thuney,
that up,
obviously.
No Thuney, but I think we were onto something about running backs versus the Ravens defense. One thing that I pulled together is running the yards per carry for like the elite running backs going up against this Ravens D. So if you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, Kyren Williams, CMC, A-Chain, their yards per carry, 3 of the 4 went over 6 yards per carry. Only Kyren Williams had 4.6 yards per carry, but it just seems like the top end running backs and offenses can have their way with the Ravens D, but obviously, and another thing that I noticed as well, like Singletary was being used a lot in the passing game. It seemed like the Ravens were having trouble covering him out of the backfield. I wonder if they'll use Pacheco that way, see that on tape, and try to get him involved in the passing game.
The two of their weakest, or two of the Ravens' best run stopping performances came against the two of the worst offensive lines in the game. Houston in the playoffs, and then the Chargers, I think it was earlier in the season, may have been the other one where they had a fantastic run defense. Other than that, they are giving up yards, like you said. They're giving up big yards per carry, and Pacheco is so good and so underutilized in the passing game. Here lately, I've seen him running wide receiver type routes, not just being the screen pass guy or the check down guy. Like he's running routes like I wish Rashad White would run for Tampa Bay. And he's catching the passes and getting touchdown, like 15 and 20-yard touchdown catches out of the backfield now. So that's, to me, this whole game is going to be hinging on Pacheco. So I'm betting the props on Pacheco, counting that he's going to be fine. And I wish Joe Thuney was there, but I think and hope Pacheco can overcome that. He's going to get a lot of volume to at least take out the base prop, which is, I think, 63 yards. He can get that with the Kansas City's backup guard on the one side. But I'm also going to bet the 100 over, 110, 120 over props on the alts on DraftKings as well, which were Pacheco was over 120 yards, was plus 1,200 earlier in the week. So I took a little flyer on that, thinking that this may be a game where he gets 25 plus carries in a game. And Baltimore's not going to go. Baltimore can't go into this game going, okay, we got to get this defense ready to stop the run game. Because if Kansas City even senses that, then Mahomes is going to start to go off if they're overstacking the run. But they're not going to overstack the run on the Chiefs. You know that they're either going to play balanced or they're going to be worried to death about Mahomes. And that may open it up even more for Pacheco. So I'm not married to either side against the spread. I'm married in this game prop-wise to Pacheco.
And while Kansas City's dealing with these injuries, it seems that Baltimore's getting healthier. So Mark Andrews had 2 full practices this week. And also they have Marlon Humphrey, who put in 2 limited practices. They've been missing their top corner for a while. So his being there would be a big boost. But one surprise DNP on their side that I just noticed, Rocky Yassin, I don't know how to enunciate his name. He appeared on the injury report today. He didn't practice. So I guess Humphrey coming in and him potentially going out is probably a net gain. But if they're both ready to go, they're
Rocky
looking like
Sin.
Yeah.
Rocky Sin being out is actually a benefit for Baltimore.
Okay.
I love it.
RC knows.
If I'm betting on Kansas City, I want Rocky Sin to be healthy and Marlon Humphrey not to be.
Yeah. You would think that Humphrey's going to probably just go on Rashid Rice. So if he's going, then maybe like you want to avoid Rice, and especially like just attacking Kansas City, you're going to be focused on trying to get their passing game under control, like you were saying, not really hone in on Pacheco.
Can we focus on Andrews for a second, because he practiced a couple of times last week. Andrew, you said he put in two full practices, and his props are really low. So it doesn't seem like the expectation is that he slides back into his normal role. I mean, 3.5 catches, 30-something yards. If he plays, he's going to be the guy that Lamar throws the ball to. He's not going to come back and get taken out of the game every other play like Dalton Kincaid.
I don't know. I've drawn interest on that vibe, but in a different way. I'm skeptical of Andrews being active, which I think he will be, but I think it's not 100% sure thing yet. But then if he is active, it's not going to be like, hey, he's back. We're going 75% snap share, and Isaiah Likely, you can go to the bench. The guy who's got ever lowering prop numbers is Isaiah Likely, and he may play half the game and be able to beat those props a la Trey Palmer, like right off the bat.
Yeah, I like Likely a lot in that regard too. I might not like go all the way with him in DFS, but his prop numbers are pretty deflated, and him and Lamar have something going there. I don't think they're going to just insert Andrews and have Likely play 20% of the snaps. If anything, I could see a split between them. I could see 50-50, which in that case, you probably still want to play Likely and like for where his props are right now.
When I've seen these tight ends come back from injury, just off from my memory banks, they don't seem to come back their very first game, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're playing your normal snap share. Here we go. It's like Darren Waller and there was somebody else that I was thinking of that I've now lost track of. That they're out, but when they Laporta, when he was hurt,
yeah.
Yeah, he only played like 30 or so percent of the snaps the wild card round, and then played normal the second game. They're normal the second game, but their first game back, they don't seem to overload these tight ends. Just off the top of my head, going back through the season.
Well, Andrews is he's a tight end, but he's more like a Kelsey type, Kittle type. I think he's a different animal than those guys. See, I do like the Isaiah Likely angle that even if Andrews is in there, Likely could still get action. I don't see a reception number for him on either place, but I do see his yards.
Yeah, I've seen the yards.
Only at DraftKings do I see the yards for Likely.
And Casey should have a pretty easy time shutting down the Baltimore receivers. I mean, I don't think Zay Flowers is going to give that secondary any problems. Same with OBJ and Bateman. So it's more likely they're going to attack him with Likely or Andrews.
But I think that, if you're betting Likely, you have a chance at some yardage because of the connection with Lamar. You don't hope for it, but you got the re-injury. If we get Andrews aggravates anything and has to come out of the game, then you've got a great bet. But you can get there even without. I'm just looking at the alt props for Likely. 25 yards is plus 110. 50 yards is 470. All the way up to 70 yards receiving is plus 1100. I think I like the lower ones better for the numbers you're getting. Likely 40 yards plus 280. So I think, and even if I was starting to get the feeling that even though I was saying I lean toward the Chiefs, there is some 20% chance that Baltimore wins this game in a blowout. And I think if that happens, Andrews is off the field. If he's still hurt and they're planning on limiting his snaps, he's gone to get 2 weeks for the Super Bowl. And then you have Likely, in there at the end of the game. Now, in that case, how much are you going to be passing if you're blowing the other team out? But Likely will be on the field.
But even if they're up 2 scores, right? Like they might just pull Andrews out and they'll still be in they're going to run the ball more than they would if it was a close game, but it won't be an exactly like, hey, you got to run the ball all 3 down scenario.
Yeah.
They don't lose a lot with Likely going in. It's not like it's this, Noah Gray drop off from Kelsey. Likely's pretty good.
He has a connection not only with Lamar, but remember last year with Snoop Huntley, if they even pull Lamar out and put that guy in, him and Snoop had a pretty good connection last year.
Can I add this in because it'll enter the prop conversation, but to me the key thing I would love to see from the future in advance on the Kansas City game, if I couldn't be told the score or anything juicy, if I could know, how many touches Pacheco got, that would be key for me. There's a second item that I would love to see that I think could be the thing that Baltimore shoots themselves in the foot with and cost themselves the game. And Chris is going to think of it within the next 5 to 10 seconds who I'm talking about. That Baltimore could very well fall into the trap of using a particular player too much, trying to be too cute, and it ends up biting them just like it did the Jets several times this season. And that's if they try to push Dalvin Cook, because Harbaugh loves to split up those carries. I think every time Dalvin Cook gets the ball is a potential win for Kansas City.
But let's also, for everybody else, like context with Dalvin Cook's carries last week, they came in it was garbage time, right? Like he didn't get any carries when the game was close. RC, what I wanted to actually ask you about, Justice Hill, he was in on 57% of the snaps. Like I remember watching that game live, just thinking like, wow, like they're really pushing Hill over Edwards against Houston. Was that a matchup specific push, or is there something going on?
It's not normal. I bet the Hill props because they were so low, and I thought he'd get 5, 6, 7, 8 carries and be able to wipe out his 13 yards or 18 yards rushing, whatever it was, and he wiped it out, within about 4 carries early in the game. That's the best they've treated Justice Hill in a while. Every time you think you've got to beat on what Harbaugh's going to do for touch distribution for the running backs, he'll do something different. It's like Belichick, and it makes a lot of sense to just try to keep throwing curveballs at your opponent and use the running backs as interchangeable entities that you're not leaning on one in particular. But I think if they try to get cute and put Dalvin Cook into that just because he had, one nice run or 1.5 nice runs last week, and that they were so clever that they got him off of, free agency when nobody else wanted him, I think he's a detriment potentially when he touches the ball, because it probably means it's a touch taken away from Justice Hill, who I think is a productive carrier receiver of the ball. So if I saw that Justice Hill was under what Dalvin Cook's touches were, I would probably tell you that the Ravens ended up losing this game. There'll be a 3rd and 2 where they could put in Edwards or they should put in Justice Hill, and they'll put in Dalvin Cook, and he'll get stuffed short, and Lamar will give it to him instead of pulling it away because it's Dalvin Cook, and that could be the difference of the game.
Wow.
I don't know that they're going to go there, but they got him involved. I mean, yes, it was some garbage time-ish touches, but there was some. The game was still a game. Hey, we're going to get Dalvin Cook's, blow the rust off and give him some touches here, and he did okay on 1 or 2 of them.
And to wrap up, I think as of right now, I'm leaning on taking Casey with the points, but a lot of that is Pacheco playing? Is Tooney going to be in? I need to reconsider that. So there's a big asterisk next to me taking Casey. Assuming everyone's good to go, assuming Pacheco's good to go, I'm okay with that 3.5 bet. I mean, anytime you get Mahomes with points, he's money. So it's sort of like Brady's record against the spread. You just got to, it's long term, it's a losing proposition if you want to bet against Mahomes, especially as an underdog. So for that reason, I'm leaning Casey, but I'm keeping my eye out on Pacheco. Any final thoughts before we move on? Any other prop bets you guys want to share with the audience?
Well, I actually like, as far as if you're looking at sides and totals, I think it's interesting the first half under 22.5, because if you think about the discussion that we've had so far, it's a bunch of question marks on the offenses of both of these teams. Both of the defenses don't seem to have any of those injury question marks. In fact, was it Rock Ya-Sin is out, which is a positive, and Humphreys is back. It's all the things are leaning to the defenses. And if you think about this game from the Ravens standpoint, you don't want to lose it early. You want to play from ahead like they usually do, but this is not Houston. This is the shot to go to the Super Bowl. It's Mahomes. I could see a lot of running from both teams. And in fact, if you look at last week in the blowout win, the Ravens, all their stats are rushing. I just looked and I was surprised to see that Lamar threw for 152 yards. He went back old school. So,
and it was Lamar running. So if Kansas City is able to stop him, as they have been able to in the past.
They've been able to stop him in the past, and I'm going to pull it up now. Mahomes' passing yards career against Baltimore, it was unbelievable. It's 4 games, 343 yards, 385 yards, 374 yards, and 377 yards. That's his 4 games against Baltimore. And remember, the Kansas City's 3-1 against Baltimore. The only game they lost was that, I think it was early in the season, like a week 2 game, 36-35. And I was trying to think. I didn't look it up, but I think Kansas City had the ball and someone fumbled.
It was actually week 3, 34-20. I think, Chris, you're right about that. Some weird things went on, but that was actually the last time Mahomes was a big underdog as well. That 3.5, he was also priced in at plus 3.5 for that game.
I remember the fumble because it was Oher was the guy who did it, and he was a rookie because we were cheering for Micah Parsons to be the defensive rookie of the year, and he not only forced the fumble, but he recovered it. That's why I remember that so vividly. But there's been no track record of history. I can't lay 4. While I can see that there is a scenario where Baltimore rolls in this game, I can't lay 4 with a team that can't beat the other team.
It was 2021. It was 36-35 Baltimore with 3 minutes for Mahomes to get them down for the win, the field goal, whatever. And he was driving them down, got them down to the Ravens' 32-yard line with 1:20 left. And the great Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumbled, created by Oweh, the defensive lineman. And that gave the ball back to Baltimore, and they stuck out with the win that was probably going to be a loss. I was remembering, I think the season before, Baltimore was real hot and everybody was excited about them, and the Chiefs just smashed them like in week 3 or something like that.
Yeah, I had the score backwards, RC. When I said 34-20, it was actually the Chiefs beating the Ravens by that amount. I had the games mixed up.
But last week's box score, doesn't it fly in the face of this idea that it's a new Lamar and a new passing Lamar with the Todd Monken offense? Because he didn't if he passed his way to a blowout last week, even if it was against Houston, at least he was throwing the ball. And I get you don't have to throw the ball a lot if you're blowing someone out, but that game was close 5-10 minutes into the third quarter.
Texans should have been up 13-10 and missed a field goal at the buzzer going into halftime, or they'd have been leading that game.
Yeah. And the Ravens defense played excellent. There's nothing more you could ask from them. It was a turnover that led to a shanked punt that led to the field goal and a punt return. So the defense dominated. It was awesome. But it's still a Harbaugh team. So if the coordinator's not the same, it's still the same head coach of a defense that Mahomes has lit up for. Nothing under 350.
It's too. I would put it in a nutshell of this is 2 overrated offenses mainstream absolutely thinks Lamar Jackson walks on water, and everybody loves Mahomes, but this has been Mahomes' worst year in the NFL, especially the second half. Lamar has been good. He hasn't been magical, but everybody thinks these are the two best quarterbacks and the two best offenses because of the quarterbacks. It's not. It's really the battle of two good defenses that are going to need to run the ball at each other. And if Kansas City comes out throwing with Baltimore not caught by surprise on that, like I don't think Baltimore's going to be stacking the box on the run. So if Kansas City goes out there and throws at a defense that's ready for them to be thrown on, and then Kansas City starts fizzling out their drives like they have been because they're trying to pass and it's just not working, and then Baltimore can seize control, Kansas City's going to get rocked. But if this turns out to be these two teams run and defense at each other, which is strange in this era that it's going to come down to that, the unders point total, the unders in the first half, all that is at play, and then the point spread, getting the points. If there's not going to be a lot of points in this game, even if Baltimore wins, it could be 2017 type of score. I don't think it's going to be either one of these teams blows the other one out, especially in the rain.
Yeah, I agree. This is the first time that the Ravens have been back to the championship game, by the way, since they won the Super Bowl back in 2012. And it's actually the first game in Baltimore, first championship game in Baltimore since 1971 when they were actually the Baltimore Colts. But safe to say, this is the biggest game of Lamar Jackson's career. He's had an MVP season. He's also, although maybe not totally through the air, past 3 games, I think he's been averaging over 300 total yards, 3.7 total touchdowns, and has a 73.1% completion percentage. So this is one of the best 3-game stretches of his career, including at San Francisco versus Miami and last week at Houston. So he's been on a tear, as he has been all season. He's going to run away with MVP, but we'll see what happens. This is going to be a good game. 2 quarterbacks, but I think what's going to surprise people is what RC is going to say, because the game's going to come down to the rushing game, who plays better defense, who controls the ball. And if Casey falls behind early and they don't try to establish the run early, then the game script's going to get away from them, and they're not going to run Pacheco when they're down 14. They're going to be forced to pass, so that's going to be key for them, and we'll see if they make those adjustments. Now, let's move to the second game on our slate, and that's going to be the Detroit Lions going into Santa Clara to take on the 49ers. The 49ers are no strangers to the NFC Championship game, whereas the Lions, I don't think have been in the NFC Championship game in a really long time. I want to say maybe 30-ish years. The last, maybe in the 90s, they were in it. But the key question here is whether Deebo Samuel is going to play or not. The 49ers are 1-4 straight up when he's in, and they're 0-5 when he's not in, and they're 0-5 against the spread. Also when Deebo's out, so that's the key question for me, whether or not he's going to be able to go. Chris, San Francisco is the 7-point home favorite, over unders 51. How do you see this one shaking out?
Well, I agree that Deebo's a big part of it. Their record is awesome with him. They can't seem to get things done without him. I think just the interchangeable nature of having McCaffrey and Deebo, it must be something where even when he's out for the whole game and they prepare, they underperform their expectations. But in this game, I'm not looking at Detroit, plus a 7. I guess there was a 6.5 early. I didn't see that. I got one of the first 7s that was minus 105. I took that. I noticed it's minus 120 now. If there was something that anyone was comfortable teasing, I would think a teaser with San Francisco good here, but I would lay the 7. I wouldn't be worried about a close conference championship win. I think Detroit has had a great run. One of my preseason best bets was minus 150 to make the playoffs on the Lions. You kind of enjoyed the ride, but the defense has deteriorated and been playing so poorly that when you can cover it up a little bit at home, but it gets exposed on the road. So the Lions defense being so poor in their 2 playoff games, combined with San Francisco not firing on all cylinders last week and having to pull the game out, just leads me to believe that we're going to get their best effort here, maybe even a better spot than them in the Super Bowl. So I like San Fran here. Obviously, if Debo being in there, I heard this week that if Debo's in, the line is 7.25, and if he's out, it's under a touchdown. So, but the line is pushing toward 7.5 now. You see those 7s juiced minus 120, which suggests he's playing. But I got to tell you, Andrew, a lot of those stats that I heard people quoting, terrible record when Debo starts and ends the game. Well, that's unfair and cherry picky, and it's not helpful because we can know if he starts, but we can't know if he finishes. So he's obviously important to the team, but I'm going to go out here and believe that even if he's not there, San Fran can get it done because of the lack of resistance on the other side of the ball when the Niners have it.
Debo put in a limited practice today, for those of you wondering on his status, but we still don't know if he's going to be able to go on Sunday. RC, what are your thoughts on this game?
Quick follow-up. The Debo numbers that you were saying against the spread and all that, was that this year?
This year.
Okay. Because last year, without Debo, they were winning games. Debo was out for a stretch, and that was when Purdy was winning every game. So it
was just that remember the 3-game losing streak? He wasn't there for that. And people tied him directly to that.
Yeah. In one of those games they should have won, the Cleveland game. So it'd be better if Debo was playing for sure. But I think the 2 things you want to attack, the 2 things that are attackable in this Final Four is attacking the Baltimore's run defense, but then way above that, the number one thing to bet on, which we've been betting on every round of the playoffs, is attacking the Lions' pass defense. So I think Purdy has been fantastic this year for the most part. I think Shanahan just cuts him loose in this game, and they're going to be an air raid on Detroit. And Detroit will get behind, and they're not going to be able to. I mean, San Francisco's not got that defense. I don't think their defense is as good as Kansas City or Baltimore's, but it's good. So you're not going to push it around. It's not going to be like the Rams game or the Tampa Bay game where it's just going to be scoring back and forth, moving the ball back and forth. If San Francisco can get a lead, I don't know that Detroit's going to be able to keep up with them on the road against the San Francisco defense. And even if it stays close, even if it's a bit of a tussle, I think you just have to keep betting against the Lions' pass defense.
Chris mentioned how they looked really bad in the playoffs, right? When Stafford went crazy on them, Baker obviously had his way with them. But we can go back a little further than that, too. They gave up 2 amazing games to Nick Mullins. So think about that for a second. Someone like that's a replacement level quarterback had their way with the Lions D. Now you have the Lions D on the road with all those questions, right? And the fact that their offense is probably not going to put the defense in favorable positions because they're probably going to have a lot of 3 and outs. But the biggest key for me here, a lot of people are honing in on Debo, and I'm glad that Chris called out that statistic and, said that that's not something he's looking in, that he's not really taking that seriously. And RC pointed out that they won without Debo. They were just fine without Debo last year. But I think the bigger thing for me are the injuries on Detroit's offensive line. You have 2 big pieces there. Frank Ragnow, the all-pro center, who's going to most likely be out, and Jonah Jackson, who's I don't know that he's all-pro, but he's pretty good. And that's 2 of their 5 key pieces on the offensive line that are most likely going to be out. And I think that's going to give Goff trouble, especially on the road. So that's something I'm keeping my eye on. If I get both those guys got DNPs the past 2 days, if they don't practice on Friday either, I think I'm going to really lean into that San Francisco -7.
Can I give you the last 5 games of passing yardage against the Lions?
Please.
Without naming the quarterback, just in a row from 5 games ago to the current. 411, 345, 396, 367, 349. If you don't think Brock Purdy's hitting that 262 when I bet it, I think it's up over 270 plus.
It jumped. FanDuel's got 274.5. That thing really jumped.
And everyone's probably thinking about how quote unquote bad he looked against Green Bay last week. But keep in mind, if you look at the fourth quarter, everyone's talking about, oh my God, Jordan Love and the Packers did so well. Jordan Love had a 50% completion percentage and tossed 2 interceptions in that second half, right? Whereas Brock Purdy, he had a pretty I know all game he was choppy, but that last drive he had was pretty freaking good. I mean, that he really and there was a lot on the line too. Think about it. He's Mr. Irrelevant. He's going up against the Packers, who everyone expected, and we did too, that they're going to win by a lot.
And they were playing a great game up to that. On defense, they were the better team on both sides of the ball for 50 minutes of that game.
Absolutely. But everything was on the line for Purdy. If he tosses a pick 6, his job could be on the line and he might not get another go again. But in the face of all that pressure, he just stepped up and delivered one hell of a drive that ended up with a CMC touchdown. Had an incredible pass to Juwan Jennings too in that. That drive really just showed me the grit of Purdy. And I think that he's really there's a really good chance that Purdy's going to carve up this Lions D. So I'm looking at all the alternates on his passing yardage, 350, 375, 400. I think this can be a really big, let's get Purdy mentally right. Not that his confidence is shook or anything, but I think he's about to show the world what he's capable of.
And he did all of that at the necessary money time of the game. His 3 drives late in the game was making use of Jennings, McLeod, Conley, without Debo being there. I mean, he was using backup wide receivers to pull that game out of the fire. So, and all year he's been, everybody still thinks his job's on the line at every turn when he's really one of the 10, to me, he's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. He had amazing numbers this season in most of his games. And now you're giving him maybe the easiest matchup, a pass defense that he's going to face this year. I would not want to bet against Brock Purdy.
You have to think about this as if you're playing the stock market too a little bit. The public is thinking about this last game against the Packers. They're thinking about that 4 interception game against Baltimore. Purdy's value, just from a market sentiment perspective, is as low as it's going to get. And his matchup is as good as there's no other secondary that I would want my quarterback to play than Detroit. This is a juicy matchup. And one thing to watch out for, we mentioned his name, but if Debo can't go, Juwan Jennings played 63% of the snaps last week, and I think he had 5 catches for 60 yards. Can be a great DFS play, great prop play.
Yeah, so he's definitely the guy.
Yeah, and I haven't seen any props for him yet, but that would be, since they're pricing everybody else so high, although Kittle's only 61. I feel like your people are on this. They're not sleeping on this matchup, and I don't think they're that down on Purdy. I think the idea that the weather's supposed to be nice, the forecast looks like it's going to be nice, and certainly people are been looking at the fact that game last week was it was wet weather, and the last time Purdy was in bad weather, he didn't play well either. So this is going to be clear and against a bad defense. So even if I think this is because we were talking about last week that San Francisco's defense has actually shown some weakness. But I think, Andrew, you pointed out a couple of offensive linemen out, going outdoors, a defense that is seen and handled, well, a team that's seen and handled Goff historically when he was with the Rams. I don't think it seems, I would be really shocked if Detroit won because it seems like the end of the road for them here.
Yeah.
Purdy's had 3 really bad games in the NFL, and they were all this year, and they were all in the rain. The playoff game with Green Bay, the Baltimore game, and the Cleveland game where he was concussed and still tried to play through it, and had the drive at the end, just like he did with Green Bay, but Moody missed the field goal, the makeable field goal, won that game with him playing with a concussion in the rain. So the public still, because the analysts still don't give Purdy anywhere near the credit that he deserves, that he's a top 10 talent in the NFL. They all think he shouldn't even be the starter.
I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe how low people were after I watched that game live and I went to Twitter to see the reactions. Like, I couldn't believe how many people were really going after Purdy after that that drive he had was really clutch. I would have expected more people to be like, wow, like he pulled after starting the game so bad, like he was able to have that kind of drive and end it with the touchdown. Like that won points in my book, at least.
If you could poll the football fans at large, and let's say the football fans at large in one bucket, and all of the football analysts in another bucket, and you scooped out a random 100 of them and asked them who the better quarterback is going forward in the NFL, Brock Purdy or Bryce Young, if you asked it to the analysts and the fans, it'd probably be 90, 95, 98 for Bryce Young. And that's why the line started so low on his over, on the passing yards over. It's creeping up now because there's enough people that can put 2 and 2 together on the Lions' pass defense. But I've never seen a player, I shouldn't say I've never seen, but Purdy's one of the most disrespected players I've seen in the NFL in a long time, and all the guy keeps doing is winning and putting up numbers. It'd be one thing if he was just winning, you could say, oh, it's San Francisco, but he's winning and putting up numbers and having clutch drives when he needs them. And if he not gotten hurt last year, they probably beat Philadelphia he could be playing for back-to-back Super Bowl wins right now.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
We don't know what would have happened if he didn't get injured in that game. And kind of like how Tom Brady's career started, where the Patriots D and their offense was sort of carrying him. I mean, I'm not going to say that Purdy's being carried because he's holding his own too. But I mean, we have to give the guy, he's in the right environment to develop into a top 5 guy. I'm not going to go there yet. I think he is top 10, like RC was saying. I don't know that he's in the class of Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen quite yet. We're going to have to see that. He's going to have to prove that to us over the course of the next couple of seasons. But as of right now, he's played 2 seasons, and both seasons he's in the NFC Championship game. He's probably going to the Super Bowl this year, barring a crazy injury.
And oh, by the way, I'm going to have my elbow torn. I might have got disconnected there for a second. And oh, by the way, I'm going to have my elbow torn and have major surgery, and people are going to question whether I'm even going to be able to come back for the 2023 season. But I'm going to come back, and I'm going to be second in the league in passing yards and have my team on the brink of going to the Super Bowl. and
He was an
almost led the
MVP
league.
favorite.
Yeah, it almost led the league in passing touchdowns. I'm looking through week 17, not 18. So through week 17, he was number 2 in the league in passing touchdowns and passing yardage, coming off of major elbow arm surgery at very late in the prior season. So short time to get back, and he did, and he's even better this year.
It's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
if you take that Baltimore game out, and I know that's a big hypothetical, but the guy, like him and Lamar, he was the favorite over Lamar, I think, before that game. Like, he was about to win MVP, but he tosses those 4 picks, doesn't look too good against Green Bay, right? He starts the game choppy, and now everyone's all over him. They're waiting for him to fail because he's Mr. Irrelevant. He's a 7th round guy, and he shouldn't be good because everybody else didn't see it coming. So we'll see what he does against Detroit, but I'm optimistic on his passing game and his passing output, so he should have a pretty good day against this Lions D.
Yeah, and his prop yardage is not creeping up. It is a helium balloon. I mean, it's 279.5 on DraftKings. So,
man.
I mean, Twitter might have given him a hard time, but Twitter looks to, armchair quarterback or Monday morning quarterback everything, and pile on. So that's just the social media sewer. But for this game, the expectation is that he's going to perform really well because his props are getting bet like no other. And so it seems like Jennings is an interesting prop if Debo's out. I also saw him 35 to 1.
In.
Well, okay, so he'll be one of those second wave guys, or maybe they're not going to put his prop out because Debo doesn't have a prop number either. So that's interesting because that's the kind of guy that I was thinking about betting. I heard someone make a case for Ayuk going over. If you look at the number 1 receivers against Detroit, the numbers are off the charts. Well, we're talking about if the quarterback's throwing for 350 to 400 every game, probably the number 1 receiver is getting 120 to 150, and that's the range the numbers were in. So Ayuk over 80 is probably still good, but I think I'd like to find a guy that's more like Trey Palmer from last week, where you can get it early on because the number's so low. And I actually like Kittle at 60. I don't know if his past performance is going to, or 60.5. I don't know if his past performance is going to support that, but I don't think the Lions were great against tight ends. And I know that big game, I could see Kittle being a big part of the passing game in this one.
Yeah, Auten had a really good game against them, so I mean you could use that as a comp. So I'm pretty sure that Kittle is going to be. I think that 60.5 is perfectly fine. But if we're playing this on the SF side, we're going to think that, they're going to jump on top of them. They're going to hit them with, their passing game. On the other side, let's start thinking about the Lions now. Their game, that what they like to do is, run the ball with Montgomery, try to control the clock. That's going to get away from them. I think Gibbs is going to be on the field a lot more. And we saw this when Lions got waxed by Baltimore. Gibbs was in the game for when the game got blown out of proportion, and he had a really big day. I can see Gibbs for the Lions, especially on the receiving side, having a pretty good day. And even Amon-Ra St. Brown, if 49ers go up too much and they're all of a sudden playing like more of a, more off coverage and letting him sort of get open, I could see him having a good day as well.
So are you thinking Gibbs receiving or rushing and receiving?
I would have to say, I haven't looked at the line, but my first inclination would be Gibbs receiving, just considering that I think he'll get a lot of those check down like passes if the Lions go down early.
And get the ball on purpose in the passing game.
His rushing and receiving is 73.5, and I think most of that is rushing. Gibbs, his receiving props are only 22.5.
That's easy. I would rather play that. I mean, that could happen in a single catch. Yeah, he's really explosive.
I got a better prop for you. in the passing game involving Detroit running backs as you were talking about it. I was thinking when Detroit gets into a little bit of trouble or when they're having some back and forths, they have a hard time running the ball, all of those kind of factors mixed in, they'll get Montgomery involved in the passing game as well. They won't just abandon Montgomery and never let him see the field. They'll get him into the game, but then if they know they just can't run it with his style against San Francisco, they will use him in the passing game. He's got several double-digit yardage games in the passing games. He has a lot of zeros, but that's usually because they don't need to go there with him. But he doesn't have a prop on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, his receiving yards are 5.5. That's one you could possibly get in the first drive because it's going to be tough for Detroit with their wounded offensive line to try to run at a top run defense. There's going to be a lot of throwing and a lot of probably screen and flare throwing, and it won't all be Gibbs, who I think is legit to play like you're talking about, but it just struck me that I wonder what the Montgomery line is, and when I didn't see it on DraftKings, I'm like, oh, it's probably they're not going to give us one to play, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, let me check DraftKings or let me check FanDuel just in case, and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, 5.5 yards. I'll take
That's
that.
easy. Yeah, if you're gonna bet that if you guys also believe that what we're seeing, that San Francisco's going to jump on top of them, 5.5. I mean, that's a single catch for Montgomery, which will happen in that situation. Even though they won't run up the middle with him, they'll certainly he'll be in the game somewhat. It's not like he'll be on the sideline the entire time, but I think if it would normally be 50-50, it'll probably gear more towards like a 70-30 Gibbs situation. But that 30%, you just need one catch from Montgomery, which shouldn't be a problem.
In the playoffs, he's hit 10 or more yards both of the games, had a second best targeting of the season for him last week with Tampa with 4 targets and a season high tie 3 catches.
Yeah.
So they're not afraid to use him in the passing game. They just don't. They rather use Gibbs on purpose in the passing game, but they will use Montgomery, especially when they're struggling in the game or they're trying to keep control of a game.
Agreed.
Because Gibbs's reception numbers that's 3.5. It's juiced to the under, but it's 3.5. So 3 receptions, you can get a big play out of him and get your 22.5, but you can also get your 3 receptions and not be at your 22.5 yet. So your play between those two, RC, if you had to choose, is Montgomery over 5.5?
Yeah, I would play it that way. I wouldn't do the catches on Gibbs only because they kind of get Rachaad White like with how they use Gibbs. When you think they really need to use him, they won't. If you put the just 3.5 line out generically over their last 8 games, Gibbs would have hit it 4 times and been under 4 times. So he's riding that line. It's not like they try to wear him out. You would think that they would. Now, on the yardage side, he's had 40 yards receiving back-to-back games. So the 22, him wiping out the 22 looks pretty good. But catch counts, it gets a little wobbly.
I was also looking for Gibbs on his alt lines over 40 yards receiving is plus 280. I think that's a nice payout given that he's been over it two weeks in a row. And if we think the game state goes the way that we're thinking, and let's say Goff's already got 2 interceptions and they're down, I could see whatever running back is in the game getting the dump offs.
Yeah, and those are 2 games that were close. Like, I think if the game gets away from them, right? 2 games that were close, he had 40 yards receiving. Like, you have to think that it's going to be more than that if they're going to be down a lot.
Yeah, I like that bet. I like both of those guys.
I think both can easily hit.
Well, I think that the odds of both of them hitting are better than the odds of both of them losing.
Yeah.
I would agree.
So I like it. Okay. Do you guys want to talk, or you good with this game? Do you want to talk at all about? I don't know if it's anywhere else, but I know FanDuel has odds out for the hypothetical Super Bowl matchups already. So obviously it has to do with the 4 teams we've gone over already. But I looked at these, and I have to say that I bet 3 of them, and I'll run them by you guys to see what you think of it.
So which one did you leave out?
The only one that I didn't bet yet is probably the most likely game, and that was San Francisco against Baltimore.
Okay.
I just felt like that one, I'll take a little more time if that's the matchup, because FanDuel has San Fran as 1.5 point favorites. I guess if I had to play it, I'd probably play Baltimore plus the 1.5. But we talked about the Lions, so Ravens minus 4.5 is the spread if it's Ravens Lions, and I took the Ravens minus 4.5 in that game. And I think about this week, I understand the Ravens have home field, but they're minus 3.5 or 4 against the Chiefs, and they're only 4.5 against the Lions. That's not going to hold. I think that I mean, think about it. You would have a Lions victory over San Francisco, so that would lift their power rating and give people maybe some pause to bet against them. And they'd be a popular team who won as a 7-point underdog, but I just don't see it. And I also took the Chiefs minus 3.5 against the Lions. I think that with their defense being as bad as they are, I'll take Lamar or Mahomes over them. But the one that I like the most is 49ers Chiefs. The Chiefs are getting 3 points in that game. I think if the Chiefs beat the Ravens, that means they've kind of taken on all comers in the playoffs, and now they're back in the Super Bowl against a 49er team who will have beaten, they had their scare against Green Bay, and then they beat the Lions, which if that outcome happens, then they're not going to get that much of a bump from dispatching the Lions. Even if they crush the Lions, I think that people will think, okay, well, the Lions, it was the end of the road for them. They don't have a great defense. The Lions will be forgiven if they lose this game. They're not expected to win. They're 7-point underdogs. So I think the power rating bump is bigger for the Chiefs if they go to Baltimore and win than if San Francisco beats Detroit by 40 points. I don't think you're going to have a line of KC plus 3 if that's the Super Bowl matchup, San Francisco and Kansas City.
And I would like Andy Reid having 2 weeks to prepare for a game.
Well, you know how it goes. It'll be, if it's 3, it'll immediately go to 2.5. I'm saying people will take that 3 if that's the matchup.
Yeah.
And if you bet it on FanDuel and that matchup doesn't happen, it's void. You just get your money back. So I bet all 3 of those. I think that if the Lions win, they deserve to be underdogs in the Super Bowl, and I don't think that they probably. Again, I understand home field advantage, but they're 7-point underdogs this week. I think neutral site Super Bowl. I think the Lions deserve to be 6-point underdogs to maybe 6.5 to the Ravens, 5.5 to the Chiefs. I just think they'll get bet up.
I think a lot of it has to do with Goff and him playing outdoors outside of a dome, whereas the Super Bowl, neutral in a dome, no weather. So I could kind of see it the other way, but I get your point too.
Well, I think your Baltimore and Kansas City both have defenses that are playing better than San Francisco's right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think that, you are gonna have the Lions as maybe there'll be a popular underdog, but I think those lines will be bigger. But as I said, the one that kind of jumps out the most, that I think all of those lines move in a direction where they'd be good to bet right now. I don't think the Chiefs Lions is going to be a field goal spread. Mahomes in the
Against
Super
that,
Bowl
yeah.
against the defense that has been has been lit up lately. That line's not sticking at 3 or 3.5 rather. And if it's sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, and if it's the Mahomes against San Fran, I don't think they're going to give them the full field goal. I think it's going to be 2.5, but that's a big deal. The threes will be gone if it's San Fran KC.
How would you like this bet? I'm looking at the Super Bowl MVP futures. What about Patrick Mahomes at plus 500?
I was on a plane on, what day is it? Thursday. Yesterday morning, and the old Bet the Close co-host sent me a text. He said, "There's a bet I can't get out of my head. Travis Kelce, 50-1 to win the Super Bowl MVP."
Oh my God.
And I thought, okay, I know where you're going. The Swifties get 20% of the vote, and then the writers get the other 80%. But then I just did some quick tapping around my phone. I'm like, I've got an even better bet for you. FanDuel has Kelce 85-1 to be the Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah,
so just take it. So take it there. I think that's worth.
I might
add
it to my existing basket that I'm making me be a 49ers fan. I still have that basket of Purdy, McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk with an equal bet on all 5 of them. And if Purdy is the one, I'll have a slight loss. If McCaffrey is the one, I'll have a nice win. But then if it's any of the other 3 guys, it's going to be a very nice win. They're all 5,000, 6,000, Kittle 10,000 to 1. So I might look at adding Kelce to my basket.
Well, you can see if it is the Chiefs, obviously you like your Mahomes 5-1 and your Kelce 85-1. You've covered how much of the MVP possibilities if the Chiefs win. I mean, you've covered 95% of it.
If the Chiefs get there, they're either going to be facing San Francisco, of which it's going to be tough to run the ball. You're going to want to throw on them. So, therefore, Mahomes. But if they get the Lions, Mahomes might actually have a 300-yard passing game for once in the last 2 months. So, if they somehow draw the Lions in the Super Bowl, Mahomes may have 900 yards passing in a dome.
Well, that's going back to the bet I was talking about before. The Chiefs should be 3.5 against the Lions. I think that thing would go up.
Yeah.
Because they should be 4.5 probably, or more, against the Lions with the way their defense is playing.
That'd be something if the Lions knock down both the Rams and the 49ers, who we all thought were the 2 best teams in this tournament, and they mowed through them. That would be something. I'd have to relook at the Lions unless it was some crazy fluky win. Like, am I overlooking the Lions like I'm overlooking the Ravens?
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to look at those lines, and you have to imagine how the perception would change if those teams won the championship game. And that's where I get to San Francisco getting a little credit for beating the Lions. Kansas City getting a lot of credit. I remember the Kansas City game is the early one. So Kansas City beats Baltimore, and then it's Mahomes back in the Super Bowl. So they're completely elevated in everybody's eyes. Should have seen it coming all along. it doesn't matter what happens in the NFC Championship game. I can't see a line where they're favored by 3.5 over the Lions and getting 3 against San Francisco.
It's a fair
Anyway,
point.
I took it now. That was my favorite is Kansas City getting 3 against San Fran. But laying 3.5 against Detroit, I like pretty well too. I just don't see that being the matchup.
Yeah, I think that ticket's going to be canceled.
Well, 2 of them are going to be canceled. Maybe 3 of them will be canceled if we get the colors of the Super Bowl logo coming through. That's the only one I didn't bet.
Fading the public there, Chris. RC, any closing thoughts on any of the games?
Nope. I am prop betting and not betting the games themselves against the spread, as is my recent trend. I'm staying in the prop world and avoiding. I don't love either one of these lines so much that I'm willing to do anything serious about it.
Chris,
what about you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, as I got to put my thoughts together for the recap of what bets, but I will be playing in KC Baltimore. I'm going to play under 22.5 in the first half. I think that's my best bet as far as that game. I'll be playing San Francisco -7 as well. And then the props we talked about, that as I have time to think about it. Well, Kelsey 85 to 1. I got to say, I already bet it because I bet as I kept finding better odds, I kept betting it. So I took the 50 just because I was on the plane. I said I immediately bought, the idea that Taylor Swift's fans are going to be voting for the 20% that the fans do. So he dominates that. And then maybe there's some of the writers that are Swiftie fans too. So Kelsey, I got him at 50 to 1, 65 to 1, 85 to 1. I like the idea of having a future on Kelsey to win MVP.
I can't wait for 2 weeks from now when we're talking about prop bets. How many different prop bets will involve Taylor Swift, do you think, 2 weeks from now if Kansas City makes it to the Super Bowl?
And even the better another question is, what's Kelsey's if Kansas City wins this game, what's Kelsey's Super Bowl odds go to? How low do they go? Yeah. I think it gets down to 15 to 1.
Probably.
12 to 1. He's not going to be. I mean,
there's a lot of juice on that 80. It's very juicy. 85 to 1. That's a nice bet.
And I understand that they're underdogs this week. I get it, and if they don't get there, they don't get there. But Lamar Jackson's 2 to 1 to win the Super Bowl MVP. So, that's the kind of thing where you're going to see. I mean, I think if Baltimore makes it, he could very well flip to a -150 favorite. But there's a lot more room to run on the Kelsey odds. That's pretty big. But I like Kittle over 60.5 yards. I like Kittle to score a touchdown, and I will bet Gibbs and Montgomery because I think the combo of those two is good logic that we're very likely to get one, and the odds of getting both are better than the odds of missing both with the Detroit running backs. I think that's solid.
Yep. Well, I think that's all we had for everybody today. I want to thank everybody for listening again. Subscribe to Chris's podcast, Bet the Close. You can find that on Spotify. Check out RC's site, ffmetrics.com, and my YouTube handle @AndrewDFS. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back next week with Super Bowl props, Super Bowl lines. Have a great week, and best of luck on all your betting endeavors. And we're